Welcome to Asia Biodynamic Research Network first online meeting. Introduction to Biodynamic Research and Methodologies. Asia Biodynamic Research Network is an open network which aims to support regional co-working initiatives to build and share expertise in developing agriculture and nutrition research that combine both scientific and spiritual scientific methods. Approaches which considers the spiritual, ecological, social, economic, and cultural environment for the biodynamic movement in Asian countries and beyond. We believe that with positive and forward-looking ideas, research activities and research results can support problem solving, further develop biodynamic farming practices, and meet the major challenges of our time, such as ecological, socio-economic, and spiritual crisis. ABRN work together with any individual or organization in local and worldwide biodynamic movement. In particular, the Biodynamic Federation Demeter International, Section for Agriculture at the Goetheanistic, and Forschungsring for advice, support, partnership, and collaboration. We are very grateful for their full support in the formation of this initiative and making this first online training a very encouraging startup. The research area that we are supporting and not limited to are biodynamic preparation work, plants and soil, nutrition and food quality, animal husbandry, Goetheanistic, science and arts, sustainability and regenerative, biodynamic training and education. The current team consists of 11 countries with 17 working members and country representatives. For our program today, we will start with two leading contributions. How can research support agricultural practice? Participatory, Horizontal and Vertical Holism Research Methodology by Dr. Christopher Brook, and Goetheanistic and Artistic Inquiry Research Methodology by Eduardo Rincón. The contributions were followed by question and answer, and then 4 contributions from Asia research initiators. Let us welcome Dr. Christopher Brook. He is a research coordinator for BFDI, board member at the Forschungsring, member of the Circle of Representatives of the Section for Agriculture, and co-founder of the International Biodynamic Research Network. His research priorities include soil fertility, participatory research, research methodologies, and the philosophy of science. Welcome, Dr. Christopher Brook.
Thank you very much, Chiking. Can you hear me, everybody?
Very clearly.
Okay, really excited to be here. It's amazing to see that there are 100 participants in this room and in this meeting. So I really believe that the Asian Biodynamic Research Network already now is the largest biodynamic research network in the world. As you may know, we started an initiative, the initiative of the International Biodynamic Research Network 2 years ago, which is an open network on the global level. And of course, you are all very much invited to join this network. There are no formal obligations, and it's just to be in touch with the global community. Also, if you are interested, you can just contact me or Chiking afterwards. And yeah, but now for this initiative, I will try to share my screen. Hope that works now. Let's see. Yeah, this one. And now we have it. Can you see it full screen now?
We can see, yeah, it's full screen now.
Yes.
It's full screen now. Okay, great.
Fine. Great.
Okay, so the title is How Can Research Support Agricultural Practice? And this is about this participatory, horizontal, and vertical holism. So it's a bit, let's say, an edgy title, but I will try to elaborate this. I think as I'm not too sure who you are in the audience, whether you are farmers or researchers or both, whether you are trainers, advisors, I'm not very clear about that, what you are really expecting from this talk, but I hope I can present something that is interesting for all of you. So first thing to start with, I'm very happy that biodynamic agriculture today, for me, is a really cosmopolitical movement. That means starting as some perhaps European impulse that is based on these lectures of Rudolf Steiner and Kobawitz, it became, especially in the last decade, very, very cosmopolitical. And I'm very happy to see that biodynamics really is taken up on several places in the world by the people, and then also shaped by the people in the world. And I think this is very beautiful that there is now several Asian versions of biodynamics and Latin American and North American and African and so on versions evolving together with these European impulses, and we are all together forming something that obviously fits to the whole world. And I'm very happy to see this. This is a picture from last year's members assembly of BFDI, and you see some people maybe that you may know in the front, a colleague from China, and then Sandeep Kamat in the back. And it was very, very nice to see so many people from so many different places in the world coming together, and they are, we are, you are, we all are the biodynamic movement. And when you look to the graph on the right side, and then this is just an illustration of the origin of research papers that have been published in regular scientific journals, so of their regional origin. And of course, we see that at the moment, the majority of the papers still comes from Europe, almost 3/4. But this is really changing. If I would have drawn this figure based on publications only 10 years ago in 2015, there would have been almost only European papers and some from other places. And in only 10 years, it shifted very much. And I see that this shift is going on, which means that not only the movement, but also research is becoming more and more cosmopolitical. And this is very nice. So this just as an introduction. Before I start with the well, let's say the basic content on research methodology for biodynamics, I would like to give a short introduction to Forschungsring, the institute that I'm working for and I'm affiliated with. Forschungsring is an independent research institute in biodynamic food and farming, but we also feel to be a member of the global organic farming movement as, let's say, the one representative of the biodynamic movement. Forschungsring has been founded in 1950 to study biodynamics based on sciences and with a strong emphasis on natural sciences to make biodynamic farming comprehensible for the, let's say, the larger scientific community. The Forschungsring Association has not very many members. It's a rather small association, but the main activity is that we have a research institute with approximately 20 employees today. We have own experimental field and greenhouse stations or a station. We have a lab for picture forming methods. And we are doing a lot of work like research management or research coordination for Demeter Germany. We cooperate with other organic farming organizations, with universities and research institutes. And even though we have a strong regional focus on Germany, we are today working more and more also worldwide, but in the sense that we don't want to go somewhere and then be the European biodynamic researchers coming to do the research. No, our attitude is and our intention is to support research worldwide. So we are very happy to cooperate and network with initiatives around the world that want to study or that are studying biodynamic food and farming. Some impressions from Forschungsring. So this is how it looks like. This at the left is our largest experimental field. We have several experimental fields, but this is the largest one, where we are just conducting a new experiment on the biodynamic preparations. And there is also our institute at the top right, and at the bottom right, this is from our not glasshouse station, but from the in-housed experimental station. So as said, the Forschungsring started as an institute that wanted to study effects of biodynamic management on plants and soil in field and pot experiments. And it was also always important to develop new methods for scientific research, like contributing to picture forming methods and lately empathic food testing. And as you see, in the last decades, there were new fields of activity that we started, like scientific support for the biodynamic community, participatory on-farm research, holistic research in biodynamic and organic food and farming, and then international networking that became more and more important. So now in medias res, right into things. What can research deliver? I mean, knowledge is something that is not only related to research, as we all know, of course. Even more important is, in my opinion, that of course knowledge is mainly, or agricultural knowledge is mainly created on farms. So it is agriculture, it is a cultural activity, and it is not some scientific spill out or scientific startup, but it's really a cultural practice. And so most of the knowledge we have in farming, in agriculture, has been developed on the field by farmers and other peoples involved in farming. It may be based on experience, mainly, and intuition, which is both very important. So in farming, of course, when farmers out there try to develop something, then usually they get experience by repeating, by adapting, and so on. And then based on this experience and the experience of other farmers or of their fathers and forefathers, they develop agricultural practices and optimize them and whatsoever. And of course, another very important source of knowledge in farming has, at least in former times in Europe, and I believe in other parts of the world, it may be more strong until today. And even in Europe, it may still be strong, but it is more tacit in a way, not so much appreciated, even though it should be, is intuition. So these are the sources of knowledge that is created on farms. So why do we need science, and what can science deliver? Science has just another way of creating knowledge and getting to know. And it is very important that this practice knowledge or farm-based knowledge and scientific knowledge can complement each other very effectively. So science is, let's say, a structured way and a systematic way of exploring something that is based on, or very important in science, is to define the methods on how you can answer a question and how you get to the knowledge. So this is more systematic. This is more, formalized than on the farms, of course. And what is also very important is that science really is analyzing in a way, meaning not only collecting experience to, let's say, prevent errors and succeed in what you are doing, but analyzing really means to contextualize, to put your observations into a context and then understand why something has happened and what may happen under slightly different circumstances. So I think these two ways of creating knowledge can complement each other very effectively and very nicely. And so this is what science can deliver to the development of farming systems. Now the question, of course, is how could we study biodynamic food and farming? And basically, we can do it in the same way as we can do with other food systems and farming systems. And here's something which is very interesting. Sometimes, especially in Europe, biodynamic research is recognized as something that is not scientific and that has nothing to do with science, and that is just some weird whatsoever esoterics. And it is not recognized that, of course, in biodynamics and in anthroposophy, we apply all these standards of good scientific practice, but perhaps we take another perspective, and perhaps, of course, we go beyond it because we have another idea of, let's say, how the world is, what the character of the world is, or what the being of the world is in the end. But it can go very nicely together, and that means we know that biodynamic farming has shaped strongly the development of organic farming, because there are very many ideas that come out of this biodynamic perspective that are so useful and highly applicable, even if you are not into anthroposophy. Yeah, and of course, even in science, we always discover when we engage in scientific projects with partners from outside the biodynamic community, that it is our perspective that very often delivers, let's say, new elements and new impulses to research. So I think what is very important is that we always aim to be holistic, whatever that means. And when we ask ourselves, what is this holism, then I think we can approach it from two different perspectives. We can speak of something that is like a horizontal holism, or in modern terms, it is, in my opinion, interdisciplinarity. So if we work on some object and want to see it from different perspectives, then of course it makes that really makes sense, and that means we need to combine different expertises and different disciplines to study something. For example, we can start to look at the soil. We can look at animals in agriculture, plants, the environment, market, culture, social life, and of course also health. And these are all very important aspects of food and farming, of food systems and of farming systems, with a high relevance for the society and for farming as a cultural activity that is delivering something for the common good. And that means that this interdisciplinary perspective is very important to really understand what is happening, to understand the context of something, of some phenomena that you observe on farms, or some challenges that you may face. And interdisciplinarity, of course, is something that is not only in biodynamic research, but it is very common today in the classical academical world, even though, to my experience as a researcher, interdisciplinary is more, let's say, there is more story than there really is interdisciplinarity. So very many scientists, of course, claim that they want to do interdisciplinary research, but in the end, it's often a very loose cooperation. So I would say it's just emerging, it's just developing, even in the classical scientific sector. And so we, in a way, are well, definitely up to date in doing scientific interdisciplinary research. To give an example, if we want to look on the role of animals in the farm organism, we are just working on that in several projects with regular universities. And then, of course, we can look at this issue from very different perspectives and from the very different also scientific perspectives. There is a biological perspective, because animals on the farm have an impact on biodiversity, and they can support the conservation of biodiversity. We can take a food systems perspective, which means that with animals we are able to produce food from land that is not arable. And of course, it may be land that could be plowed, but we also can produce food from land that is not plowable for whatever reason, because we don't want to plow it, because it is very valuable grassland or whatsoever, or because it is just soils that would not really give sufficient yields of arable crops. So this is a very important perspective on animals. Of course, we need the ethological perspective, meaning what are the requirements of animals in terms of health and well-being. We can take a soil science perspective because animals impact on soil functions and soil fertility, mainly as they produce a very, very valuable fertilizer for crop production. And as we know, this fertilizer is really helpful in improving soil fertility. We can take an agroecological perspective, meaning that we want to look on the efficiency of farm nutrient cycles, because animals can really improve internal cycling of nutrients and of matter altogether within the farm, which is not so easy, cannot so easily be achieved without animals. We can take an economical perspective on the diversity of products, on diversification, on resiliency in an economic perspective and all that. And we can take a social perspective, studying human-animal relations and their relevance for, let's say, for the humans, but also for the community, perhaps. We can study questions of mindset. We can study challenges in these relations of humans and animals. And this is all very important if we want to understand the role of animals on the farm. And what one missing? Ah, there it is. And we can take a cultural perspective. That means, of course, the keeping of animals, depending on where you are in the world, of course, has an impact on landscape and on the shape of the landscape. It is connected to traditions. And then there's also this aspect of animals enlivening the farms in a way. So these are very different perspectives where we can work together, or where we should collaborate between researchers from different disciplines, and not only researchers. It is also important to include non-research knowledge or non-scientific knowledge bearers from the practice. So I think even more modern than interdisciplinary research is transdisciplinary research, where you also include the farmers and advisors and other stakeholders into research. But a big challenge for us, of course, is that that there are some assumptions that differ or that make it difficult to study biodynamics with modern natural sciences. And this is that, of course, we do not only see the physical world, which can be studied from a purely materialistic perspective, but we also see that there is something which is life, or the living world, which can only partly be studied purely based on the materialistic perspective, because the materialistic perspective until today was not able to explain what life really is. And then, of course, if we say there is even a spiritual world, then we have the problem that the materialistic Cartesian science today is not able to approach this level, which means there is nothing that can be said. It can neither be verified nor falsified. It is just not accessible for this perspective. And that means if we, as biodynamics and as other people that perhaps also have the idea of a spiritual world, then we need to include other knowledge systems that allow us to consider the spiritual world in our research. And this is the holistic perspective, because the holistic perspective just has all of these levels in it. And anthroposophy, for example, is one perspective that considers both the physical but also the spiritual world. And I would like to give a short example before I stop. And we had a project on the sheet in biodynamic beekeeping. You see the sheet there. It's a device that you place in the comb between the honey sphere and the brood sphere to prevent the queen from laying eggs into the honey sphere that you want to harvest. And we had a very, very strong debate among German biodynamic beekeepers whether this is something that you can use in biodynamic beekeeping or not. And there were two groups, and one claiming that the sheet is really harmful for the bees and bad for honey quality, and the other group said no, that's not the case. And this was my first project when I came to Demeter. Then they called me and said, we need research, we need to know about this to decide. So this was the background dispute. What did we do? I organized a participatory workshop to identify researchable questions and appropriate methods to answer the question, what information do the participants need to make a decision? So I didn't just ask scientists or myself about parameters that we could study. No, we said, okay, the question is, what do you as beekeepers need in terms of information to make up your mind and to make a decision? And from that, we came to research questions or researchable questions. And the questions were, what is the impact of the sheet on honey quality, on the vitality of bees, and on workload of the beekeeper? Then we had to find indicators, and there this vertical holism comes in, because the beekeeper said, okay, we are interested in chemical properties, standard honey analysis. But they also said, well, we are also interested in taste, still very classical, but also in what is it, what happens in your body and in your, let's say, how you feel, and on that level of life. And then they also said, well, we also want to have an idea on what happens on this, let's say, physical level as a whole. And we're happy to have these picture forming methods that try to study an object on a level that is more integrative than this chemical properties level. And then it was also important for the beekeepers to consider formative forces and the reaction of the spiritual world to the sheet. And of course, this is something where in classical science, the people would say, okay, this is not researchable. We can't do this, perhaps from a social science perspective or religious science perspective, but we can't really study these, let's say, aspects of the spiritual world. And we said, okay, what can we do? We can include methods from different knowledge systems. Chemical analysis to analyze chemical properties, sensorical tasting to analyze taste, but then empathic food testing to study this response of the body, of the living body, and then the picture forming methods to get an idea of effects on that physical level as a whole. Then the perception of formative forces, and then we also included a person who did conduct a spiritual dialogue with the bees, or with the bee being, which, well, was based on a completely different knowledge system. But the funny thing is that this approach is even appreciated in modern science, and it is known as co-creation of knowledge with different epistemologies. That means you can apply different knowledge systems that must not be compatible, but as long as they are relevant for decision making, because the people that want the decision say that these information is relevant for them, then it may help to draw a full picture. And then in other cultural environments, there could even be other ways of getting to knowledge. And if we just take this together and try to take these different systems, even though they don't seem to be compatible, then we come to full picture. And in that project, for example, we found out that the sheet in fact had a subtle impact on honey quality, negative impact, which was only visible with methods that approach the living world, picture forming methods, empathic food testing, formative forces, perception, but it was not very strong, that impact. And the main thing we found out in this process was that the dispute among the beekeepers was not actually about the sheet, but about the intention and implementation of biodynamic beekeeping, which was a much more, let's say, relevant result than that result that was only on the sheet. And so this holistic perspective on the whole thing, on the whole problem, on the whole challenge, and they attempt to really understand it from different perspectives is what I think was really the success factor for the whole project. And I think this is so important in studying biodynamic food and farming and also other agricultural systems and food systems. So last slide, the holistic perspective in biodynamic research. Let's just go for another example. If we look on a farm and we try to understand the farm, then of course we can do it on a very classical, with a very classical perspective and say it is a production unit. It stands alone. We just postulate it, or we just treat it as if it has no relation to the environment, as if it was technical controllable, and well, not living at all. And this is a very classical, you on the farm, where in agriculture, many measures have been developed, fertilization, weed control, and so on, with this perspective on the farm. But we could also say, well, this is more modern and also common now in classical science. We could look on the farm as a system where elements are interacting with each other and with the environment. The system has a contact. There are not only interactions, but also relations, which is more living. And it is, well, and it is still controllable as a system and regular. We could also go for another perspective, and now it does not work. I don't know why, but now, okay. We could go one step further and perceive the farm as an organism. An organism has a limited designability because it is as a whole, standing as a whole, and it is only healthy as a whole. So it has a limited designability. Organs have functions and cannot easily be replaced, or not at all. The organism is more than the sum of its parts. It has individual characteristics. It has the ability to self-regulate, to develop, and it is alive. An organism has this dimension of life in it, and it needs to be healthy. So life and healthiness are two completely new elements that come in when we take this perspective on a farm. And then on the last level, we could even say, try to perceive the farm as an individuality. The individuality has these aspects of thinking, of feeling, of willingfulness in a way. It is whole and unique. It is independent, but in relation. And there is empathy needed to understand the individuality. And in individuality can learn and develop. And you see now that we move through these different levels, coming from the materialistic perspective, through the perspective that includes life, going up to that what includes the spirit and then the I. So this idea of the anthroposophy. And I think it is very helpful to take all those different perspectives and to see what we can learn. Of course, we don't need to explore the full individuality thing in every case. For example, when we are working on some very specific issue in plant protection, but still it is very helpful to always first ask, okay, what is this context and what is it really that we are studying? Is it just something that is completely controllable? Or is it something that has an individuality, or at least is kind of a living organism? And because that completely changes the way of perceiving something, and then also the solutions that may be developed. Yeah, so that is it what I wanted to show, and I hope I did not waste the time of the next speakers too much. Unfortunately, I did not have the clock here. Last thing to do is to say thank you very much, to wish you all the best, and I really hope to see at least some of you in Cirencester in the UK in fall, where we have the 3rd International Biodynamic Research Conference, and I hope to see all of you once physically somewhere in this beautiful world. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you, Christopher, once again for your wonderful sharing. And now we welcome Eduardo Rincón, co-leader of the section for agriculture, for his presentation, Goetheanistic and Artistic Inquiry Research Methodology. Eduardo is a biologist, artist, and biodynamic farmer. He studied biology and earned a master's in phenomenology applied to art and science, integrating them through biodynamic agriculture. He co-founded the Biodynamic Association of Mexico and served as its president from 2018 to 23. He was also Mexico's representative in the founding of the BFDI. So welcome, Eduardo.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good night. It is really a pleasure to be here with you. So, as has been said, I work now since August of last year in the section for agriculture here in Switzerland, in Dornach. And the section is part of the School of Spiritual Science of the Goetheanistic. I will not go into that right now. We can have a talk about it at some other point. But we are, let's say, part of the biodynamic movement in one of its aspects. And there is also the BFDI, Forschungsring, and other parts of our movement. So I am in one aspect of the biodynamic movement. I will present to you something that is connected to my personal biography, but that I believe can be helpful for the different views and the different challenges that we have today as farmers, as gardeners, as teachers, as researchers. So I prepared a slideshow. Let's call it a PowerPoint. And I'll tell you a little bit of how I see this world of research and this world of biodynamic work. This is a very interesting couple of drawings. They were made by Galileo in the year 1609. This is very interesting because these are drawings he made when he was first observing the moon with an object that we all can acquire through any store or in the internet called a telescope. But at that time, it was quite revolutionary to be able to expand the sensing capability of our eyes with an instrument that magnified our vision, and we could see beyond our normal human capabilities. At the same time, the other aspect of our vision was also enhanced by the microscope. So human beings had now at this time the capability of seeing nature in a more profound way. But apart from this, around 500 years ago, there came a really remarkable change in our consciousness. Up until that century, most of the research of humans based on art and based on religion was focused on understanding the spiritual world. Most of the art and the religion was focused on that. But starting in those years, 500 years ago, not only in Europe, not only in Central Europe, but in all of the world, and this is a research that you can conduct in your own countries, what was happening 500 years ago? How was our consciousness changing from looking at the world as a manifestation of the spiritual world into looking at the world as a materialistic manifestation of natural laws, physical laws? That changed, started manifesting in Europe with Galileo, but it was manifesting in different parts of the world in a different way. In the Americas, in Asia, in other parts of the world, it was moving our consciousness. And for example, here we see in the year 1665, the drawing that Newton made to present his theory of colors at the Academy in England, where we're going to be having our research conference this September. And he did this drawing because he actually didn't go there. And most of the work that Newton was working on was actually a research in theology. But then he got interested because of this shift in consciousness that I'm talking about 500 years. He was interested in understanding light, and he broke up light into colors, and he described light as wavelength. And he developed the mathematics to understand that. This is also a very crucial moment in life, changing from understanding life as a spiritual manifestation into a physical understanding of the world. And then we move in history to Goethe. And he did this drawing in Italy around 1787. And he started doing something that is very connected to what we do in biodynamics and its basis, which is anthroposophy, as you all know. And he used art and science to understand the world. And this, even though he did not describe it in detail, he just did it, he just experimented with it, was what we now called Goetheanistic understanding of life. And to narrow it down to its very basic ideas, which Steiner took Goethe's ideas and then gave us this, what we now call Goetheanistic inquiry into research. We are talking about 4 major processes in our understanding of the world. We begin with exact sensory perception, describing the phenomena. This is also called the earth step. Then we move this into an imaginative thinking, which moves in time. We call this the water step. Then we contemplate the phenomena. And finally, we work through intuitive thinking. Of course, in this session, we cannot go in deep into these processes, but this is more or less what this mode of inquiry moves us into. We do not assess nature by what we have as a theory, but we let the phenomena speak to us and we start our inquiry, our research based on that. I think that every aspect of nature, every aspect of research begins with a question. Whether we are gardeners or farmers or researchers or teachers, when we experience nature, we have this longing to understand, and we start asking ourselves, why? Why did my crop fail? Why is the ground or the soil in my farm the way it is? Why is my garden having different growth processes in one area than in the other? Why do flowers of this species come first? We have a lot of whys. That's how we view the world. And for the scientific method, which was born around 500 years ago and which had its peak in the 19th century, this methodology, which deals primarily with physical phenomena, became very, very accurate at describing this phenomenon. And we feel that this is the whole world, but it is not. It is missing that which we cannot see or perceive with our senses, or even with our machines or technology. And that is what we call the spiritual world, the untangible world. And the questions that we now have into the future should be addressed both in a physical way and in an untangible way. And that can be studied through this path of knowledge that we call anthroposophy. And that was described by Christopher in his vertical analysis of the world, from the physical to the spiritual, through different methodologies. And I believe that now, through this fusion of the spiritual and the material understanding of the world, we can now complete the picture of our work. And when we see a phenomena in our farms, gardens, or classroom, or wherever we are working, we can now think that what we are observing is only part of the reality, what in ancient India was called Maya. And there is something behind that image of the physical, which we can also understand through this path of knowledge. As has been said before, I studied in the tropical forest. I know some of you, a lot of you, live close or near the tropical forest or in the tropical forest. And I wasn't studying anthroposophy when I was working in the tropical forest. And I had the question of how is a particular group of plants, the ferns, how are they distributed in the farm? In the tropical forest. And so I took these images like this one from a lens, a 360-degree lens. I took pictures of the canvas, and I could see the light going in. So I measured all of the variables that could help me explain the distribution of these ferns in the tropical forest. I did measurements of light, slope, degrees of slope, temperature, etc., other variables. And in this process, I was immersed for a few years. I could notice that I was not going to be able to perceive or to capture everything that I wanted to study. And so in my quest for this, I felt that I came to a stop and I couldn't understand nature more than that. And I used art to complement my understanding of life. I had been trained as a painter. And so I started drawing and painting the tropical forest. This opened my world into a much broader understanding of life. I could, through art, begin to perceive that there was more than meets the eye, as they say. There was more about the forest, the tropical forest, that I could explain through natural perception methodologies. So to me, art became a tool to understand nature. And this can be done not only with painting, but with poetry, with music, with many of the arts that we know now. At least in my own development, understanding nature became much broader when I brought art as a tool. And I will give you another example. I worked with a group of trees that are figs. I know in the tropical forest, you know that the fig trees can be 30 meters or more high. This is not normal in Europe, but in the countries of the tropical forest, this is normal to have trees so big. And in my land in Mexico, they were being exterminated. These trees are majestic trees that grow in different regions of the Americas, tropical Americas. And they were used to make paper. On the left here, you see an ancient paper description about 1,000 years ago. And these trees were becoming extinct. And so my question was, why are they becoming extinct and how can I recuperate these trees? So I collected the seeds, the figs of these trees in different ways. I did drawings of these trees. I did an analysis of the taxonomy of the trees, the distribution of the trees, and then I made an exhibit of this in an ex-convent. I planted in little petri dishes, laboratory dishes, like you see on the right, and I planted seeds of these 7 species of trees in this ex-convent as a museum, but also as a gesture of regeneration. And I obtained 350,000 trees from this experiment. I also hanged some leaves of these trees, and I sewed string in them as a gesture of healing. And then I did experiments with these trees. In the end, I had about 35,000 trees that were able to recuperate. And we started a reforestation project with this. Children from different schools in different parts of Mexico were involved in this project. And this project moved from a scientific approach to a ecological approach and to a social approach. So the question of what to do with the trees became much bigger, and I was able to do this project in many areas, a holistic way of doing it. And of course, I also did paintings, drawings, and many other things around these beautiful trees. This was all before I was immersed in anthroposophy and biodynamics. But now I am currently working in this project. It's a project about the oak tree. As we know, the oaks are a central aspect of our work in biodynamic preps. It's a biodynamic prep from the tree. This is a picture. I am on top of a mountain where I used to live in Mexico, and you can see some oak trees in the bottom, but the rest has been thoroughly deforested. It has become a semi-desert. And I also had the question, what happened to these trees? How can I recuperate these trees? And of course, my biggest question as a farmer was, can I use the bark of these oak trees to make the biodynamic preparation in my country with the local oaks? So I started this experiment. Now this is a view from my farm in the bottom up to the hills where you can still see there are oaks up in the top. They didn't cut those. They are present in these ravines. And so I started again a methodology with art. I started collecting the seeds and propagating the seeds, learning about their germination, their distribution, their taxonomy, the names, the scientific information about these trees. I started doing art with them, collecting the different aspects of the different parts of the species. I started painting, doing paintings, and then of course I started collecting the different barks of the tree to be able to do experiments and see the differences in the different species on how they acted and worked in comparison to the species that Rudolf Steiner proposes, the Quercus rubor. So I started this experiment. This experiment is still going on. If you see here, this is I'm already germinating some local ones. So this experiment is still working, and I will be conducting this for the future. So what I wanted to bring to you is the idea that we make experiments when we have a question. The way to approach our questions is to go about it. And my proposal is that we do it in the most expansive way possible. We can invite, like it is obvious from the work that Christopher showed us, that you have an interdisciplinary, you invite colleagues from different aspects, the scientific hardcore group, the artists, the social, etc. You work, you see your projects in a holistic way, and we learn to approach the answer to the questions in a much more broad aspect than what we are used to in conventional science. But is science restricted only to scientists? Is research restricted only to scientists? Can only scientists do research? And my answer to this question is not. Every farmer, every teacher, every gardener, everybody who is working in the different aspects of life can answer the questions to the phenomena that is being close to them in this holistic way. So one of my approaches, and as a farmer, you walk every morning in the forest, or sorry, in your field, and you observe and you make decisions. You say, oh, the plants need water. Oh, there's an insect coming. Oh, I see bacteria's coming to the soil, or I need to make my soil richer. These are things that you experience every day. So if you can make a question out of this, you are in the possibility of doing your own research in your own garden, farm, or classroom, or wherever you are. The idea, as Christopher said, is that you have to have a methodology, and you also have to have a systematic way of looking for the answer. And this to me is resolved with a book, a simple logbook, a simple notebook, where you start measuring, or you start noting the phenomena that is there. When did these, let's say, bacteria started appearing, or these insects started appearing? What is its relationship to the calendar? What moment of the moon was happening? And you start collecting your own observations every day, relating it to the farm, to your local weather, to your calendar, and your question starts taking shape in a different way. Of course, this is first approach is to keep a logbook, keep notes about what's happening in your farm, because whether we are conscious of it or not, our decisions in our garden or farm are based on what we are observing. And if we are not consistent in our observations, we may think, oh, last year it rained more, so now I'm going to do this. And if you have a logbook, you can go back and see, no, it didn't start raining when I thought. I actually recorded when the rains came and what happened with that and why did it coincide with the moon cycle. And your decisions about applying preparations, about many other things can be coupled with your observations in the field. Of course, then you can start incorporating art and other aspects and phenomenology, etc. But this is my first recommendation. Seeing the profile of all of the people coming to this lecture, I wanted to do it in a more easy way of understanding research and the different aspects of it. So thank you very much, and we'll be open for questions now.
Thank you, Eduardo. And we open the question to all. You feel free to open up your mic and raise a question, or type a question in the chat box. You can use the language that you are comfortable with.
Eduardo, how far did you get with the oak question for Mexico? This is it good for Mexico, this oak that you were, or did you find one oak that is good for the prep?
Well, this project was started just as I was moving to Europe. So I'm still in the process. I have made the first steps. I found 7 species of oaks in my region. I have collected the oak bark from them. And what is very beautiful is that sometimes in these creeks or ravines, I hope it's not difficult to translate that, when the mountains go like this and there's a river going through, sometimes these species are there in these ravines. So I was able to find the distribution of the oaks in 7 rivers. So my idea was to collect the bark, put it in the head of the animal in the river in the same place where the oak is distributed, and then use the prep in the field to have 7 experiments of the different oak barks and the oak bark originally proposed by Rudolf Steiner. But I didn't get that far. I am now here in Europe, so the experiment is still on its way.
So how do we compare different species of the BD crab plants to the right one spoken by Steiner?
This is a very interesting question, and I think we all have it, especially in the tropics, especially in the deserts, especially where we don't have a 4-season year. And there is a fast answer, and there is an answer that I believe is the one. I have been very surprised here in Europe, and this is my first spring here. And if you walk around the Goetheanum today, in this spring, we are now in spring here quite powerfully, it is incredible the amount of dandelion flowers naturally growing around the Goetheanum. It's really beautiful. But not only that, there is equisetum growing also thoroughly. There is yarrow, and there is nettle just out here in the garden around. So for me now, this is a new hypothesis that I have, is that these plants that Rudolf Steiner described in the course are plants that are completely close to the region. It's not plants that are in the mountains far away in a special space. They are common European plants. Of course, he had the capacity to see much beyond the physical reality that we don't have that, at least I don't. So my proposal is that but this is of course a total research project, is that we observe what are the plants that are in our region, that are growing in our region, that are ancient plants that have been there and that are part of our landscape, that could give us insight into a research project that might lead in the future to saying we can use these plants in our regions. Of course, you have to know how these plants, the ones that are proposed by Rudolf Steiner, work in the most profound way that we can, through a holistic understanding of the preparations, before we could even think of proposing new plants. But when I saw how common these plants are, even here in a garden in the Goetheanum, I was inspired to think, how can we start a research question into understanding how these plants are related to the regions that we live in? Of course, this takes a long time, and most of us, or we can't go as deep as Rudolf Steiner went into the understanding of these plants. But I believe that in the future, through understanding how these plants work profoundly, the plants described by Rudolf Steiner, we can begin a process of research into the future for new plants.
Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. One more question on prep by making. Jack from India. So he has a question. Are there experiments done to find replacement for stacked blader to make a 502? As getting stacked bladers is a big issue in countries like India or Sri Lanka. From your knowledge, Christopher and Eduardo.
Maybe Christopher, you want to say something?
Yeah, I appreciate what you just said, because I think, we don't have a common concept for studying alternative preps until now. And as you said, there is no methodology that we could follow at the moment. But of course, we can try to follow Steiner's methodology as far as we can, and building on that and on farmer knowledge, peasant knowledge, and on traditional knowledge and on scientific knowledge, we can try to find out together. So I think it's really worth it to go for that topic and not just try to, in a way, get the step ladder, because that is what Steiner said, but to really try to understand why it is the step ladder, and of course, and what could it else be then, yeah. And for that, we really need people that are really into anthroposophy. We need people that are really into farming, and we need also people that are really into science. And I think we have all those people. I think even in this 100-person meeting at the moment, just the challenge will be really to start to connect and to work together, because, well, it's a lot of effort, but it's worth it. So we don't have a common concept, but if we try to approach it with these different expertises and perspectives, then I think we have a good chance of getting ahead with this in the future.
Don't know of any research to use an alternative to the bladders. Yes. For example, in the Americas, we have another challenge. The cows are not local. They were brought by the Europeans in only 500 years ago. So it's not a local animal, although we use it, etc. But these are all very interesting questions. In my understanding, Rudolf Steiner brought something and said, why don't you think about this? He didn't say this is the only way. He said, look at this. This is interesting. Why don't you develop in your own way, in your own land, in your own region, something that is in this spirit, but local? This is the big challenge that we have for the next 100 years.
Thank you. We would like to invite our next presenter, contributors from Asia, and I pass the facilitation to Alex.
Thank you, Chik-Ying, and thank you to all the contributors till now, the enriching contributions. Let's first present Dr. Regina Sharmila Dass. It's my pleasure to present her today. She's an associate professor, biodynamic agriculture trainer and consultant for over 15 years in India. She specializes in soil health, microbiology, and Demeter certification. Today, she will bring us her current research study on the use of biodynamic compost in India. Welcome, Dr. Regina.
Good evening, everyone. I bring greetings to you from India, and I share a lot of love and light to each one of you present here. I think Christopher and Eduardo have set a perfect stage by telling us so much about the work that they do. And I'm here to tell you a very small piece of work that we did in India. Before that, just to quickly introduce myself, that I work with grassroots level farmers in India and tribal farmers as well. So my first slide here just tells about where I work. And this is a picture that was taken in a village called Labjari in one of the remote villages of an Indian state called Visakhapatnam. And I'm examining a lichen which is found in one of the coffee plantations of a regenerative agriculture farmer. Now, very quickly, coming directly to the subject, there's one very popular saying by Nicolette Nyman. She says, Chiki, can you please move the slides? Yeah. It says, healthy soil is the single most important foundation of a viable, sustainable food system. There's always this understanding that what kind of generations we are producing. At least the situation here in India is that we mostly are eating toxic food, drinking toxic water, and producing toxic generations. That is something I heard from a very popular biodynamic practitioner in India, and it really swept me off my feet. And it's the food that one eats, it's the food that one grows. How much of it is good? Is it the yield or is it the quality? Now that debate is endless. If you look at my title for today, it says, the next slide, please. It says that it's a small research study, keeping time in mind, on the use of biodynamic compost in India. I showed to you in the next slide how we tried to restore a coffee plantation in a 4-year-old study that was conducted from 2014 to 2018. At the time when we started the work, the coffee plantations were like this because this plot especially was one of the most neglected plots where no biodynamic preparations were being added for a very long time. And the manager there wanted to reclaim or restore this piece of land. So I thought that this plot would serve as an excellent control plot, as a very good comparative control. And we started our work with the first year with 6 applications of biodynamic compost per year during the descending period. And I usually try to recommend at least 15 to 20 tons of biodynamic compost because tea plantations are heavy feeders. And in the second year, we came down to 4 applications in the descending period, and the third and the fourth year were also done similarly. When we looked at the results, this is the picture that was taken after 4 years. And this company, this particular company, they had the finances, they had the infrastructure, they had the kind of finances to get their soil tested every year. And when a soil test was done, I present to you in the next slide a graphical representation which shows the gradual increase in the organic matter content of the soil. Now, if you look at this slide, we started at around 2.9 or maybe 3. That is still considered a luxury in India, but it rose gradually to about 6, sometimes to about 5%, sometimes to about 4%. So the value slowly and gradually increased. So that was an indication that the organic matter content is gradually increasing. Now, organic matter content is very important because it's an indicator of soil health. It serves as food for microorganisms, and it also improves water holding capacities. The benefits of the organic matter are many, but I'm just listing a few of them. We saw that there was this gradual increase, and the soil and the crop health also became better. Now, this is not a part of our study or part of today's discussion, but I'm showing you another picture that was taken on yet another biodynamic farm in Gujarat, and another one in a place called Araku Valley, which is in the western part of India, northeastern part of India, sorry. And this is another place where they did biodynamic rice cultivation, though I don't have control plots at the moment. I would like to conclude by saying that biodynamic compost with the preparations certainly had a positive and an enormous effect on the soil quality and in the soil organic matter content. While I present to you today just one parameter, there are several other parameters that were also tested. I'm open for any questions or discussions that you may have for me, and I've asked Chick to share my email ID with anyone who would be interested. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much. I think we will continue to the next presentation for now. If there are questions, however, put them into the chat box, and maybe at the end we'll see if we can get any live answers. But for a question of time now, let's move on. And I'd like to present Thanga Pandian. He is a science engineer and now a biodynamic farmer and field researcher in India. So he said he has been hearing the biodynamic community talking about nutrient superiority in biodynamic products, and out of his curiosity, he initiated field work and lab tests using gas chromatogram mass spectroscopy. Did I say that right? Method. And this is to observe and detect nutrient compound. It is a collaborative work with Anthoniselvi. So, may I pass the word on to you, Pandian?
So, Vanakkam, good afternoon. My name is Thanga Pandian. I am presenting a very small research work we have done in our field. The nutritional comparison of biodynamic and chemically grown vegetables using GCMS, gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis. And this work is done with 3 institutions. One is Farm India, where I belong to, and Anthoniselvi, and a Kaveri College of Women, Department of Biotechnology. In 1924, Rudolf Steiner made a categorical statement. Mineral fertilizers should be phased out completely, as the effect of any type of mineral fertilizer used on the field crop causes them over time to lose their nutritional value. And in 2024, the Authority of Indian Agricultural Research, ICAR, came with the finding that Indians consume rice and wheat low in value, high in toxin. What does it mean? The farming community, the research community, or the agricultural industry institutions worked overtime over a period of 100 years to prove what Rudolf Steiner told 100 years ago. So, a research in material science, more than 3 decades experience, and a newcomer to agriculture, particularly biodynamic agriculture, I was always curious that how can we establish the biodynamic producers having better nutrition of the so-called life forces. So my team took a 1-acre plot and started cultivating tomatoes, following strictly the biodynamic way. For example, it's a 4,000 square meter area, 8,000 plants, and we used 5 heaps of biodynamic compost while the land preparation. In the land preparation, we applied BD 500, and then in the root treatment, 5 kg CPP, 300 grams as standard in the winter we followed. You can see side pictures. In my farm, some 1-acre plot has been chosen, and we also involved university students to work in the field, and they're transplanting the tomato seedlings in my farm. And as a part, the biodynamic process standards, we apply aerial spray of BD 501. Every month, the sequential spray, all of you know. And particularly, we did not use any chemical biological pesticides. We use only neem kernel and some pheromone traps. And we also involved a traditional methods, what I've been following in Tamil Nadu, particularly the 3G solution for pest control management. 3G means ginger, garlic, and green chili for controlling the pest in the tomato farm. You can see some of the pictures in my farm, and Selvi is in the bottom doing some work in the field. And this is my farm picture. And we got some nice, beautiful, very tasty tomatoes. Our the main purpose of this research was to establish the superiority of the biodynamically produced vegetables. So we collaborated with an institution called Kaveri College for Women. We submitted the biodynamically grown the tomatoes and also the chemically grown from my neighbor field, because I was not able to use chemical as a control plot. So the two samples have been given, and they prepared samples and they compared using gas chromatography mass spectrometry. Actually, we had a long chat yesterday with the team, the same chromatograph method or not. This particular methodology is a very advanced methodology which can do qualitative and also quantitative analysis. I'm not really a super expert in establishing the analytical methods, but I have closely worked with the research team that this is one of the accurate, very fast, and economically acceptable method. Even there are methods called HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography, which can be used to analyze the secondary metabolites or antioxidants or other phytochemicals, even in ppm, ppb levels. But that equipment is very expensive. So we are from local area in Tamil Nadu. So we have identified the nearby academic institutions, and we started working with them. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, it's not actually, I can't say it is expected or unexpected. We found the derivative of a secondary metabolite, which is called terbutaline. And this particular secondary metabolite is responsible for delay of premature labor, anti-cancer activity, and also supports easy breathing. So what this says about this particular research? The biodynamically grown vegetables are having the appropriate nutrients and the secondary metabolites which are necessary for the human health. But over a period of time, we started using chemicals, we started using pesticides, and those vegetables or the food grains lack these required nutrients or the metabolites which are necessary for human health. So we conclude that the biodynamically grown vegetables contain unique beneficial compounds. The chemical one really it lacks essential life forces. And Steiner was far ahead of his time in predicting this importance of the fertilizer system in agriculture. So what I request this August research community in Asia and beyond, that we should also work like this field researchers, that the biodynamically grown material or organically grown materials are superior, and this can be proven clinically and in the laboratory. So this is only a small beginning. So I request the August body of this research community to take it forward, and we can work collaboratively. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I again thank everyone for your time. We will work together and we will continue the journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pandian. Great. Well, moving on, we will now turn to Liron Israely. Liron is founding director of the Adama Haya Center in Israel, which offers training, inputs, and project management services for biodynamics to regenerative farming. He's actively engaged in Biodynamic Federation, Demeter International training, research, and advisory work. Also a prep maker and Jyotish student. He will bring us some of his experience and sharing on how we could possibly do quality testing through chromatography observation and astronomic influence on fertility in cow herds.
This short description of what we do. Adama Chaya in Hebrew stands for living soil. Let me put it on full screen. And I just bring here some insights of some of the work that we do in Israel. So that's you already said. When we talked about quality, and again, I'll be quick to go over Pfeiffer's quotes on circular chromatography as an image-forming method where to understand and to study the formative forces, and above all, to develop a perspective judgment power. And in a sense, it really relates to what Eduardo talked earlier about this relationship to what we observe and how do we judge it and to understand it. And that relates to an Australian, Alec Podolinsky, that said that when we want to research the living, the entirety of nature, the total living essence, we cannot only use the dead realm, in a sense, the material part, and we need to have a way of understanding. And this is where they develop chromatography as a way to understand this already modernly talked about relationship around the root top, where the chromas, this is the circle that you see below, is a representation of the capillary motion, these liquids that come into the tip of the root and flow into the plant, and in a sense flow the other way around. These are the chromas, and in a sense, if we want to have a non-numeric, a non-quantitative way of understanding what we are working is, how do we use this Pfeiffer circular chromatography to understand living in a non-numeric way, and as well how to help pharma from a social perspective, as well in the similar holism that Christopher talked about, how to enable pharma to better study the soil. We've done a research all across Israel in different regions, and in a sense, the chromas enable us to look at different farming practices, and you can very easily see with a non-scientific, non-quantitative approach that each different soil treatment, as seen here, brings a different quality. Now, in conventional science, if there's no numbers behind it, it's always a difficulty to how do I understand a representation of capillary motion. The liquid of the soil is moving from the center outwards, creating different form pattern across different treatment, as you can see in this one farm here in the northern part of Israel. And then what we try to develop is, in a sense, a sensory perception of attribute. And me working with the Indian medicine, such as Ayurveda and Jyotish, there are these different bunches of qualities to understand living. They are called gunas in Ayurveda, which are talking about collections of qualities that are relating together, that what in anthroposophy is mainly talked about the different elements. And in a sense, behind each element representation, there's a direct sensory perception. Anyone can understand what is heavy and what is static, what is dense and what is hard and what is gross. It's commonly perceived. The measurement is depending on the sensitivity, but it's something that we can create a system. And in a sense, what we are working with this formative pictures is how can we characterize them by living perception, by this gunas, ancient Indian perspective, enable us to understand liquid fluidity within to the plant, and how to develop a way of, on one hand, working systematically, coherently, but on the other hand, enable us to work both with our imagination, with our senses, so to better understand living process and qualities. And this is a work ongoing. We have a bigger array now of samples that we have done on a big cotton project, and it is a work on development, and again, combining between old medicine approach and old ways of perceiving life and what is healthy and what is not, and how can we bring it into farming. And as I said, the other aspect with it is to work with farmers on how such a visual approach can help them understand, because many farmers tell me always, you know, I really don't understand what is 20 units of nitrogen, you know? I cannot really grasp it, hold it, visualize it, and we see that working with this kind of visual sensory approach, there's a better way to understand soil health and understand our practices and how they are influencing. And again, this is just giving an example of two aspects of the work. And another work, Eduardo, this is an update that I owe to you that's just happened recently. 800 cows herdsmen in the northern region of Israel came to me with a really interesting question. He has a question that lies between maintaining herd vital and, on the other hand, influencing the success of its fertility. And this relationship, when is fertility happening in the herd, how many calves are coming with each season, is something that he's trying to alternate with the season to enable better health and better economy. But every year there's something different happen, and we have tried to develop it into, again, formative qualities of what is in the action of fertilization of the cows, the insemination of them, the giving birth. And we looked at the vitality of the mothers, how vital they are, the jumping of the bull, how much the bulls are able or not able to go and impregnate the cows, and on the other hand, the successful of mating. And what we are trying now to do is to look historically, because he has the data of all the events when they happen along the life of the herd for many years, and how successful and not successful, and we'll try to correlate it with astronomic qualities. So when there was a successful breeding, what were the moon qualities? What were the Mars qualities influencing a jumping activity? And on the other hand, about the quality of the mating, what was the Venus quality in the time? And with that, try to see, can we develop a new understanding of astronomic farming into this question of herd breathing and fertility? So the first step is just beginning right now, that we are looking at, first of all, what were the different qualities needing? What are the astronomic properties that are influencing? It was a long process of discussion and reflecting what are the different components if influence success. And then now we'll go into historical data to look at the herd's behavior, and from that try to develop a better understanding of how and if astronomic farming can help in this herdsman breathing. Yeah, if anybody wants to keep in contact, you will have my details. They will share this presentation. And it's really great for hearing this initiative. We are in Israel, in the middle between Europe, Africa, and Asia, and we always happy to collaborate on the bridge with those who are working for life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liron, for sketches of such vast research. And for now, we'll be moving on to Etha Widiyanto. She's an architect, musician, and environmental activist. She's one of the co-founders and also Secretary General of Asosiasi Biodynamic Indonesia, the Indonesian Association for Biodynamics, since 2024. And her longtime passion and dedication to environmental sustainability has now inspired her to co-create and be active in a few community environmental movements. So while practicing biodynamics, the question of how can we make connection to what is local, to localities, drives Etha's initiatives to the research on connecting cosmic rhythm through Balinese traditional festivals and relating it to the farming work. So Etha, are you there, please? Pass
Yes,
the
I'm
word to
here.
you.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening, good day to all my biodynamic family in Asia and beyond. And thank you for ABRN Working Group for inviting me to talk 5 minutes on this. My name is Etha. And yeah, that title, Connecting Rhythm Through Bali Traditional Festivals, maybe listening to other research, maybe we should call this rediscover instead of research. It's a little bit difficult to put numbers on these things because it is more like social. But okay, I'm going to start. So this is an ongoing research that started about 2 years ago when we first tried to develop our BD calendar for Bali. In the process, we were introduced to Mariatun calendar, which we still use until now for the biodynamic version of our calendar. I'm going to share my screen now. This, okay. So this is our biodynamic calendar, Wariga Bali. So here, there are actually 2 different respected calendars running side by side. This green is our biodynamic calendar, and the inside, the red part is Bali Wariga. So as you see, we are not blending the 2 calendars together as one. We are only putting them next to each other. So our farmers can make her or his decision as to which do's and don'ts they want to follow under their certain circumstances. And by the way, the Mariatun calendar, we are only converting to our time zone and adjust the position to the Southern Hemisphere. Now that is one from us. And then what I find on this is what have we encountered here, that the Balinese traditional Wariga calendar, this is, so this is the Balinese traditional community practicing this in everyday life. It's widely used, this calendar, across the island for religious ceremonies, for social and family events, as a guidance on making decisions in business and economy, being used in traditional Balinese medicine practice, and of course, for agricultural rhythms, rules, and activities. As you see in this photo I shared, I just let it roll. And something, you imagine something so strongly influenced culture, such as this, cannot be taken lightly. These rituals and a mark in the calendar has been practiced by many generations of Balinese community and tested by hundreds of years of time cycles. Now, the question is, why is this important and worth researching? I see in learning and practicing biodynamic agriculture, a connection to the localities is crucial. such as geographical and climate conditions, indigenous biodiversities, nutritional and dietary habits, as well as traditional knowledge and wisdom that has been practiced in the culture for centuries, discovered and taught by our very own ancestors, oftentimes verbally, from generation to generation, and some of these ancient wisdom managed to get documented in forms of literatures and symbols in the Lantar manuscript. And these are treasure we inherit from our predecessors. And another motive on doing this research is the spreading of the biodynamic movement to the vast majority of local farmers, like you also see in the photos. It needs to start from some common grounds, some practice or knowledge that they are familiar with. So we are not here to teach them a new science from Europe called biodynamic, or we're not bringing to them a new religion. Instead, we want to start from what they know and help them to open up, to observe, to describe, and analyze and explain with the biodynamic way that we learn to find the solution together. Now, next, I would like to I owe my thanks to Eduardo and Liron also for the inspiration. So this time, in this already over 5 minutes maybe, I have no time to explain the content of this, but I will share the PDF in the chat, and you guys feel free to contact me. But this is our first step on making the research. And we need to study about the rhythm of the Balinese traditional festivals related to the agriculture. And we also need to go deeper study the do's and don'ts in Balinese traditional farming practice, making observation and finding connection between the traditional farming practices and biodynamic agriculture methods. Now, based on these findings, we can then put into practice. For example, we can rediscover our current calendar and develop an integrated BD Wariga Bali calendar to practice in all our farms. And we can engage the farmers to help and to be part of the observation to see whether irregularities on the rhythms or unfamiliar phenomenon occurrence. And then in the future, maybe we can make a demo plot or something for more substantial observation and research if necessary. I leave this slide running because I don't have maybe the time to explain what's in it, but basically in this graphics is the way I try to map the festivals of Balinese. The Balinese calendar are about 6 to 7 months rhythm at one time. So all of those cows in there are the festivals that we celebrate the animals, we celebrate the trees, we celebrate the macrocosm and microcosm, and then we celebrate the goddess of rice that give us the prosperity, things like that. And I will share this PDF form to the chat, and you are welcome to ask me questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Etha. Thank you, all our friends, for your contributions. So if there's any question, feel free to raise. And at the same time, we hope to invite Eduardo and Christopher to share your insights, impressions, or feedback or question for today or for our contributors.
It is really amazing to hear what is going on, and I'm Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of very, very interesting things going on in the Asian network, and I'm just very happy and curiously looking to the future. And of course, if there is any opportunity or incentive to do something together, then that will be great. So yeah, and I'm very much looking forward on working on those questions, like understanding the preparations. I mean, obviously, we in Europe, we can say, okay, we have those preparations, no need for new ones, but in principle, we have the same questions. Yeah, we all want to understand them, and also here, for example, there is a question: parts of the society really move towards these vegan ideas, and even though we still appreciate animal keeping, there's just the question: would it be thinkable to have like vegetarian preparations or whatever? So I just want to say we also have questions in understanding biodynamics, and I think we can do a lot of things together. And yeah, let's try to meet then and when and exchange. It's great. I'm very happy you invited me. Thank you for that, and thank you all, and good luck to all.
Yes, I agree with Christopher. It's really impressive, the enthusiasm, the creativity, the intelligence, the intuition that is present in this room, in this virtual room. And of course, it is very clear now that I am here in the Goetheanum that the periphery is of outside the Goetheanum is so strong. The future is coming from the inside to the Goetheanum now, and it's a breathing process, or to Europe. And so it is really enthusiastic to see all of this happening. We will see about it for the near future. How can these initiatives be linked to sources of not only resources of money, because that's not the real solution long term. The solution is really to how to develop in our countries or constellations of let's say farms that have resources locally and others. How can we creatively produce constellations that work for research from financing in our local countries, governments and enterprises? This is the real future, to be able to create that link. And we know that companies invest in research because this is the future, and also donors are interested in this. So we have to creatively construct this. Of course, at the beginning, we will be trying to support this from Europe or donors in Europe, but eventually we have to create our own local ways of supporting the research and connect it to our local economies and realities. This is also something important. I'm very happy. Thank you for inviting me, and we will help as much as we can. One of the first things that happen when you read the agriculture course and it says about snow and winter, and you don't live in a country that has winter and snow, you feel like maybe this is not for me. And then I have friends that tell me, well, we only have 2 seasons, rainy season and no rainy season. Or sometimes we only have 4 seasons, which are rain, rain, and rain, and rain. And I say, well, we have to develop the research and the understanding of how biodynamics works in our countries. It is for us to develop this. There are rhythms, there are processes in our countries also. Let's discover them together.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Christopher, for your wonderful time and contribution today. Thank you, Regina, Liron, Pandian, Etha, and translator team, Gloria, Tran, Son, and Frank. Thank you all for this wonderful session together. We warmly invite everyone to keep up your interest and initiative in research, and we will keep in touch with you. We invite you to check out Forschungsring Research Association and section for agriculture and sign up to their newsletter. And check out BFDI research material, and you're warmly welcome to join the upcoming 3rd Biodynamic Research Conference in August 2025. Thank you once again. Good evening and good night.